It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. Tensions were high today in the British Parliament over the Brexit deal proposed by Prime Minister Theresa May.
Order! The ayes to the right, 202. The noes to the left, 432. So the noes have it. The noes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the House has spoken and the government will listen. It is clear that the House does not support this deal, but tonight's vote tells us nothing about what it does support. Nothing about how or even if it intends to honour the decision the British people took in a referendum Parliament decided to hold. I can therefore confirm that if the official opposition table a confidence motion this evening in the form required by the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, the government will make time to debate that motion tomorrow.
The result of tonight's vote is the greatest defeat for a government since the 1920s in this House. This is a catastrophic defeat for this government. After 2 years of failed negotiations, the House of Commons has delivered its verdict on her Brexit deal, and that verdict is absolutely decisive.
Now, Theresa May lost the support of her own party for the proposed exit deal with the European Union by a vote of 432 to 202. This is the first time, as Jeremy Corbyn said in that clip, this is the first time such a defeat with such a large margin for a sitting government has taken place in the history of British democracy. Now, furthermore, it is clear that Theresa May has lost much more than control of the Conservative Party and, of course, the majority of the Parliament. In recent weeks, Theresa May has zigzagged regarding her position on the Brexit deal. First, threatening that if her deal is not approved by Parliament, she would resign. Then she threatened to continue towards a Brexit deal without a deal. And thirdly, she threatened to cancel Brexit altogether if she loses the vote. Well, it's all very confusing. And now that she has actually lost the vote, what will happen next? That question we will explore with John Weeks. John Weeks is Professor Emeritus at the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. He is the author of the book Economics of the 1%, How Mainstream Economics Serves the Rich, Obscure Reality, and Distorts Policy. Good to have you with us, John.
Thank you.
All right, John, let's take off with this first question. What does this decision by Parliament now mean in terms of the Brexit and, of course, the negotiations with the EU?
Right. The first thing I think everyone, all your listeners and viewers should realize is that some type of agreement will be reached, that all the discussion of a no deal, I don't know how much people follow it, but there's a lot of scaremongering about if they vote against Theresa May's agreement with the European Union, then Britain will crash out of the European Union. It'll have an economic disaster and so on. That is not going to happen. We know it's not going to happen. It's a fact that there will be some agreement. And the way we know that is quite recent development is that the leaders of the European Union have said that if Theresa May loses her vote today, they are willing to extend the negotiating period into July. Now, I don't want to tell people more than they ever knew, but that's quite an extraordinary step on the part of the leaders of the European Union, because they actually have elections coming up in May. In May, there will be elections to the European Parliament. And if you extend that period, what are you going to do with Britain? Will it have elections too? And then perhaps just a few months later, pull out of the European Union. So you'll have all of these empty seats without any British to sit on them because they've all left the European Union. It's reasonably clear why the European leaders have said that. With the exception of one or two, the 27 heads of state are all center-right. Their sympathies lie with Theresa May. They do not want a government of Jeremy Corbyn on the left. They do not want another government of the left in the European Union, much less a radical left government. And so they're willing to bail Theresa May out. In other words, there's quite a strong collusion between leaders of the European Union and Theresa May, even though it looks like she's about to lose her vote.
All right. Now, tell us about the Conservatives and the party dynamics here. Why is Theresa May being put in this vulnerable situation? Do they want her out? And if so, what will happen next?
Well, that's a very good question, because historically, the one thing the Conservative Conservative Party has been very good at is staying in government. While it is a right-wing party with a lot of right-wing ideologies, it is prepared to make all sorts of practical compromises to stay in government. Yet now, at this moment, it appears that the party is so deeply split that it may no longer be possible for it to hold itself together. It's all the more extraordinary because there's an overwhelming majority of the business community, if I may use that oxymoron, of the British capitalists in favor of staying in the European Union, particularly financial capital. Yet within the Conservative Party, there's a very deep split. Probably more than half of the Conservative MPs, of which there are almost 300, probably more than half of them are for leaving the European Union. And that appears to be driven primarily by ideology, by right-wing ideology that combines as the sort of underlying theme a free trade ideology, deregulation, driving wages down and they want a Britain that's race to the bottom in terms of international competitiveness. And but formally, they draw their support over the issue of immigration, so that you might say that their appeal to their right-wing supporters in the Conservative Party grassroots is their anti-immigration arguments, but what's really motivating them ideologically is a anti-working person, anti-regulation, anti-green ideology.
John, of course, the Labour Party is now preparing for the outcome of this vote. What is Jeremy Corbyn thinking, and what would the Labour Party be proposing here?
Well, I think if you had asked me that a few days ago, it would have been clear, and I will give briefly the answer then and talk about why it's no longer quite so clear. Just a few days ago, I would have answered by saying Jeremy Corbyn's position is that to use this vote as an opportunity to bring the Conservative government down, to defeat Theresa May, then call for a vote of confidence tomorrow. He says he's going to do that tomorrow. Try to get a majority to remove her. I'll come back to that issue, and force her to call a general election and attempt to win that general election, form a Labour government, and renegotiate with the European Union. Those in his party opposed to him, and while the Labour Party is much more united in their opposition to Theresa May than the Conservative Party is in its support of her, there is a big split. The center of the party wants a second referendum, and there's been a lot of attacks on Jeremy Corbyn over the last few weeks, trying to get him to agree to, if Labour, well, first just to support a second referendum in Parliament in hopes that you could get it through under the Tory government, but in any case to endorse a second referendum. And Jeremy Corbyn's position is saying, no, we don't want a second referendum. We want to bring the Tory government down. Now, what has changed all of that is up until a few days ago, Jeremy Corbyn could say, there's not time for a second referendum. It's all just whistling in the wind. You are proposing, my opponents are proposing something which is absurd. Now with the European Union saying we might be willing to extend things till July, that gives a new lease on life to the second referendum people. And I think there is a political motivation here. First of all, the European Union does not really want a major member to pull out, though there are leaders in the European Union that think that Britain has been a real pain in the neck over the last 20 or 30 years in negotiations in the European Union. But it is somewhat of an embarrassment to have a major country pull out. So they would like to see, perhaps many of them would like to see a referendum in which the Brexit was reversed. The other great advantage to them is if there were such a referendum, that would be quite an embarrassment to Jeremy Corbyn. So there's a deep game being played here, both from the European Union side and from the British side. On the British side, the problem that the people with the second referendum face is that Theresa May cannot support it. She has vaguely said if her agreement today is not approved, that she might consider a second referendum, but that would almost certainly bring her down. Her hardline anti-EU members would never agree to second referendum. They just wouldn't agree to it.
All right, John, for now, we'll bid you farewell.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us here on the Real News Network.